They had called it dust for so long that the name had become a kind of prophecy, a world that had forgotten it was ever anything else, a place where the only thing that grew was the patience required to survive it. But beneath the rust-orange metalite, beneath the compressed warrens where 12,000 people had spent their lives learning to want less, something had been waiting. Something had been counting. Serethi Voss walked out onto the surface alone. She did not ask permission. She did not explain. She pressed her palm to the corroded frame of the exit hatch, felt the familiar bite of chemical air against the exposed skin of her forearm, and stepped out into a world that was already changing beneath her boots. The metalite particulate was wrong. She noticed it in the first step, the way the ground gave slightly, the way the orange dust clumped rather than drifting, the way it darkened at the edges of her boot prints as if something wet were rising from below. The seed's pulse moved through the substrate like a tide too slow to see but too vast to ignore, and Serethi stood in the middle of it and felt the planet remember. She had walked this surface 1,000 times. She knew the way the chemical haze sat on the horizon like a permanent bruise, knew the way the particulate tasted of iron and old metal, knew the specific quality of silence that meant the storm systems were rotating away rather than toward. She knew dust the way you know a wound, intimately, without affection, because it is yours and because ignoring it will kill you. But the haze was thinning. She watched it happen in real time, a curtain of rust orange and sulfur yellow pulling back from the sky's upper register, retreating toward the horizon in slow billows, and through the gap it left, stars. Stars she had never seen from this ground. Behind her, at the Warren exits, she could hear the sound of 12,000 people pressing toward the light. Kale Thyros came out second. He did not announce himself. He simply appeared at her left shoulder, his prosthetic hand loose at his side, its exposed joint mechanisms catching the strange new quality of the light. He looked at the ground. He looked at the sky. He said nothing for a long time, and when he finally spoke, what he said was, "The color is wrong." And what he meant was, "It is better." Dr. Iolan Mars came third, her diagnostic lenses already cycling through spectra, the readouts scrolling faster than human eyes could track. She knelt immediately, pressing a sensor array against the darkening soil, and the numbers that came back made her sit back on her heels and stare at the instrument as if it had said something impolite. The chemical composition of the atmosphere was shifting at a rate she had no calibration for. The substrate was converting. The seed was not a slow process. It was a geological event compressed into hours, and the planet was not waiting for anyone's permission to become what it had been. Archon Valan Drace emerged from the hatch in his layered indigo robes, his ink-stained fingers already moving, writing on the air in progenitor script that no one else could read. He had spent 30 years learning a dead language. He walked to Serethi's side and began translating what the seed's activation sequence had said. Not what it had done, what it had said. The progenitors had not built a machine. They had written a sentence, and the sentence was, "This ground is ours." Then Halia Vaughn came out of the Warren exit with the survivors behind her, and everything became complicated. Halia did not look at the sky. She looked at Serethi. She had the specific quality of stillness that came from a woman who had spent 40 years deciding when to shoot and when to wait. And right now she was waiting, but not patiently. She had one arm and a prosthetic stump wrapped in progenitor thread irrigation cabling, and a bandolier of mismatched munitions across her chest, and she walked through the changing soil as if it were any other ground, and stopped 3 meters from Serethi and said, "Who decided this?" It was not a question about the seed. It was not a question about the planet. It was the oldest question in the galaxy, asked by the person most qualified to ask it, on behalf of 12,000 people who had eaten roots in tunnels while bloodlines fought over their bones. Serethi turned to face her. She did not say, "I did." She did not say, "The progenitors did." She said, "No one decided what it becomes. That is what I brought you out here to decide." Halia looked at her for a long time. Then she looked at the ground. Then she looked at the stars appearing through the thinning haze, stars that had no names yet in any language spoken by anyone alive. And she said, "Then we had better start talking." They talked through the first day of the planet's transformation. They talked while the metalite darkened and clumped and began, in the lowest hexagonal fracture lines, to show the first organic material. Not soil yet, but the precursor to soil, the substrate that soil requires, the planet's slow chemistry doing in hours what it would have taken centuries without the seed. They talked while the chemical haze retreated to the equatorial band, and then to the southern pole, and then, by nightfall of that first day, to nothing. A clear sky over the northern hemisphere for the first time in 12 centuries. Vessels from the coalition fleet sent shuttles down. Vex Karen arrived with a security detail and a face that gave nothing away, her pale green eyes scanning the perimeter with the operational stillness of a woman who had spent her career in rooms where the wrong word meant death. She set her people on the ridgelines and came to stand at the edge of the gathering, and she listened without speaking, and she did not reach for her sidearm once. Tessith Karen arrived with her leather-bound notation tablet and her ink-stained hands and her watchful grey-blue eyes, and she sat at the edge of the circle and wrote everything down. Not in the ledger's cipher, in plain language, in every language she knew, which was 11, and in the 3 she was still learning. She wrote down what Halia said, and what the Warren elders said, and what the young people who had never seen the surface said when they finally stopped crying long enough to speak. She wrote down what Serethi did not say, which was also important. What Serethi did not say, that this world is mine by blood, that House Solabri's resurrection entitles anyone to anything, that the seed's activation was an act of governance rather than an act of desperation. She did not say these things because they were not true, and because Marin had taught her in the tunnels that the most dangerous lies are the ones that feel like inheritance. What Serethi said instead, across a full day and a night of the planet's first transformation, was, "What do you need? What did you not have? What would you refuse to live under again? What would you die to prevent? What do you want your children to inherit that has nothing to do with blood?" The answers were not elegant, they were not unanimous. They were sometimes contradictory and occasionally shouted, and once, near midnight of the first night, nearly violent. A Warren elder and a surface scavenger, an argument about water rights that had been festering for 20 years, finally surfacing because the planet was changing, and everything settled by scarcity was suddenly unsettled by the possibility of abundance. Kyle stepped between them. He did not draw a weapon. He put his prosthetic hand on the elder's shoulder and his flesh hand on the scavenger's arm, and he said, "We have time. We have time now." And the strangeness of that sentence, the sheer novelty of it, spoken on a world where time had always been measured in how long the water lasted, stopped them both. Veylan wrote through the night. His fingers moved in the new soil, tracing progenitor script, then translating it into the 17 languages of the Deathworld corridor that Tessith fed him from her tablet. He was not writing what anyone told him to write. He was writing what he heard, the shape of what was being agreed, the architecture of it, the bones beneath the argument. He had spent 30 years learning a language built by a species that believed understanding was the only legitimate form of power. He was using it now to write the first document in the galaxy's history that no bloodline would own. By the second morning, the moisture had arrived. Not rain yet, not quite. But the air had changed. A heaviness to it, a weight that Ireland's instruments confirmed was water vapour at concentrations the planet had not seen in 12 centuries. The seed was not just converting the substrate, it was rebuilding the water cycle, pulling moisture from the geological layer where it had been locked in mineral bonds since the War of 9 Suns burned the original biosphere to nothing. The planet was sweating. It was the first step toward rain. Iollan stood in the middle of it with her diagnostic lenses cycling through humidity spectra and said very quietly, to no one in particular, "It is going to rain." And then she said, "I have never seen rain." And then she said nothing else for a long time. Serethi found her there and stood beside her and did not say anything either, because some things do not need commentary. The charter was finished by midday of the second day. Valen read it aloud in progenitor script first, the language of the people who had built this world and then distributed their consciousness across a network, and then been severed from it by a woman who chose understanding over inheritance. Then Tessith read it in the 17 human languages of the Death World corridor, her voice steady and her ink-stained hands holding the tablet without trembling. The charter said, "This world belongs to the people who survive on it. Governance is the agreement of the governed, renewed in each generation, owned by no bloodline, no compact, no inherited power. The planet's name is Solabri Prime. It has been called dust. It will not be called dust again." Halia Vaughan picked up the stylus first. She pressed her prosthetic stump to the page, the irrigation cabling leaving a faint impression in the material. And then she pressed the stylus into the grip of her remaining fingers and signed her name. She did not look at Serethi when she did it. She looked at the sky. The others signed. The Warren elders signed. The surface scavengers signed. Kyle signed, his prosthetic hand steadying the tablet while his flesh hand held the stylus. Valen signed in progenitor script. Tessith signed last among the council and then closed her tablet and then opened it again and wrote one more line in plain language at the bottom. Witnessed and recorded by Tessith Karen, who was taught to watch for the ledger and chose instead to watch for this. Serethi signed in the middle, not first, not last. In the middle, where a name belongs when it is one name among many rather than the name above all others. And then the rain came. It came without announcement, no crack of thunder, no dramatic darkening of the sky. The moisture simply reached saturation and fell, the way all inevitable things eventually fall, quietly and without apology. It was not a storm. It was a soft, persistent rain, the kind that soaks through everything before you realize it has started, the kind that smells of earth and iron and something green that has not existed on this planet in 12 centuries, but that the human nose recognizes anyway because the body remembers things the mind has never learned. Serethi stood in it. She tilted her face up and let it fall on her closed eyes, and her close-cropped dark hair, and her sun-darkened skin, and the chemical burn scars on her left forearm, and the fading luminous veins of the binding scars at the base of her skull, which had been dimming for months and now pulsed once. A single slow pulse, like a heartbeat finding its last rhythm, and then went still. Iollan removed her diagnostic lenses. The instruments were overwhelmed. Every reading off the scale, every calibration wrong, every number a testament to the fact that she had built her instruments for a dead world and was now standing on a living one. She put the lenses in her coat pocket and stood in the rain with her bare eyes, and the data chip at her throat, her disappeared colleague's research, the thing she had carried for years as a kind of penance, felt for the first time like something she could put down. She did not put it down, but she could. Vex Karen stood alone at the ridgeline and took a field ablation tool from her belt and pressed it to the base of her skull, where the silent choir's interlocking circles glyph had been tattooed into her skin. The tool hummed. The glyph began to fade. She did not flinch. Kyle knelt. He pressed his prosthetic hand flat against the new soil, dark and wet and real, and held it there, feeling through the joint mechanisms whatever sensation those mechanisms could transmit, which was not much, but was enough. He had buried his father in this ground. The ground was changing. He did not think his father would have minded. And in the chronicles written afterward, in the 17 languages of the Death World corridor, and the one dead language that had been used to build the world itself, the historians would argue about what this moment meant. They would argue about governance models and charter precedents, and the legal status of a world whose founding document had been signed by a woman with a prosthetic stump. They would not agree. That was the point. The Charter said so, in 17 languages and one dead one. Disagreement is not a failure of governance. It is governance. The only failure is silence. Maren Duskwell had known this. She had walked the death worlds for 40 years, memorizing the names of the dead so that the living would not have to carry them alone. She had found an infant in a wrecked transport's emergency pod and raised her in the tunnels and sung her to sleep every night in a language she did not know she was teaching. The progenitor phrase for this ground is ours, encoded in a lullaby, passed through an ash singer's mineral paste throat into a child's dreaming mind, waiting. The child had grown up and activated a terraforming engine and stood in the first reign of a reborn world and spoken the founding words of a civilization that belonged to everyone who survived on its bones. Maren would have said, that is what the song was for. The rain fell on Solabri Prime. The stars watched. The planet breathed. And for the first time in 12 centuries, the ground was not a grave.